A sitting Presbyterian pastor has been stripped of his ministry, not for adultery, not for financial fraud, not for doctrinal heresy, but for two mildly sharp tweets. That is not a summary. That is the verdict. The Rio Grande Presbytery of the Presbyterian Church in America has indefinitely suspended Zachary Garris, pastor of Bryce Avenue Presbyterian Church in White Rock, New Mexico. The stated reason: unwholesome speech, citing Ephesians 4:29. The source of that unwholesome speech? A pair of comments Garris made on X in 2023, directed at religion professor Anthony Bradley. This case is generating significant backlash in Reformed and conservative evangelical circles. And when you look at the specifics, the criticism is not hard to understand. Let's walk through exactly what happened, and why the people calling this ecclesiastical lawfare may have a point. Zachary Garris is not a fringe figure. He is a trained attorney, holds a Master of Divinity from Reformed Theological Seminary, and serves as a PCA pastor in New Mexico. He is married with 2 sons. The man whose exchange with Garris triggered this entire process, Anthony Bradley, is no fringe figure either. Bradley is a distinguished research fellow at the Acton Institute and a research professor of interdisciplinary and theological studies at Kuiper College. He is a prominent voice in Reformed and evangelical academia, and he has been a controversial one, a point we will return to shortly. The interaction at the center of this case took place on X, formerly Twitter, in late 2023. The verdict was first reported publicly by PCA Minister Sean McGowan on X. I want to read his statement directly because the precise wording matters. McGowan wrote, "At trial, the Rio Grande Presbytery found Reverend Zachary Garris not guilty of Charge 1, regarding his comments on slavery from June 2024. However, Garris was found guilty of Charge 2 for unwholesome speech, per Ephesians 4:29, based on a 2023 interaction on X with Anthony Bradley. The Presbytery has indefinitely suspended him." Read that again slowly. Not guilty on the charge involving comments about slavery. Guilty and indefinitely suspended for a 2023 exchange on X. Garris himself did not issue a public statement, but he retweeted McGowan's report. That retweet speaks for itself. McGowan also posted the formal language of Charge 2 on X. Again, I want to read this directly, because when you see how the charge was written, and then see what Garris actually said, the disproportion becomes impossible to ignore. The charge reads, Charge 2, violating the command to let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth, but what is good for necessary edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers. Ephesians 4:29. See also 2 Corinthians 13:10. Specification 1. That on or about October 9th, 2023, the said T.E. Garris did post on X, a public forum, a comment stating, "Even here you only speak of some situations. Sometimes things are more complex than a PhD can handle." Specification 2. That on or about October 8th, 2023, the said T.E. Garris did post on X, a public forum, a comment stating, "You started by misusing a Bible verse and then calling others biblically illiterate. But arrogance can't tolerate banter." Those 2 specifications. That is the entire basis for the conviction. That is the speech the Rio Grande Presbytery determined warranted stripping a man of his ministry indefinitely. No obscenity, no slander, no false accusation. Pointed banter, directed at a man who, by the specification's own account, had already called others biblically illiterate. And Bradley's original tweets, the ones that provoked Garris's responses, have since been deleted. The context that prompted the exchange is no longer publicly available. Here is where the story moves from controversial to something more serious. McGowan did not just express disagreement with the ruling. He alleged procedural violations that, if accurate, represent a fundamental failure of due process. He stated that at trial, no evidence was admitted for Charge 2. He further stated that no witnesses testified, which means Garris had no one to cross-examine and no meaningful opportunity to mount a defense against the charge that ended his ministry. McGowan's conclusion was direct. This whole thing comes across as pure, malicious lawfare. It must be made right. The Rio Grande Presbytery has not issued a public response to these allegations. They did not respond to inquiry from the Christian Post. That silence, in the face of specific procedural claims, is itself significant. The reaction in conservative Reformed and evangelical circles has been sharp, and the responses reveal a pattern that the presbytery may not have anticipated. Tom Askell, senior pastor of Grace Baptist Church in Florida and president of Founders Ministries, responded with deliberate irony. He quoted Anthony Bradley's own prior statement, "Evangelicals have never had the gospel, ever," and placed Ephesians 4:29, the very verse used to convict Garris, directly beneath it. The implication was unmistakable. If unwholesome speech is the operative standard, the presbytery has some questions to answer about whose speech it chooses to prosecute. Ryan Kaiser raised the institutional consistency question directly. He wrote, "The PCA did not disavow or suspend Greg Johnson, who identified as a gay Christian. Yet Zachary Garris is suspended for unwholesome words. Make it make sense." That is a fair question. Denominational institutions are judged not only by the standards they enforce, but by the consistency with which they enforce them. When the record shows selective application, serious controversies handled gently, sharp tweets handled severely, people notice. Then there is the response from Megan Basham, journalist and author, who had her own history with Anthony Bradley. Basham shared a screenshot of what Bradley had publicly posted about her. His words, "Megan Basham is the personification of low IQ. This is so dumb." This is the same ignorance that asks, why is there a black church? Research shows that content like hers is a sure sign of significant father issues. Basham noted that this was just one example from approximately half a dozen similar interactions. Let that comparison sit for a moment. Anthony Bradley publicly called a named woman low IQ, accused her of ignorance rooted in father issues, and mocked the very premise of her work. Zachary Garris told the same man that arrogance can't tolerate banter and that some situations are more complex than a PhD can handle. One of those men had his ministry suspended by a Presbyterian court. The other was the complainant. Here is what this case means beyond the PCA. Properly functioning church discipline is one of the most important accountability mechanisms in Christian institutional life. It is supposed to protect congregations from predatory leaders, remove genuine abusers from positions of power, and uphold the integrity of the pastorate. We believe in that work. We cover it consistently on this channel. But the same institutional power that can remove a predator can also be turned against a critic. And when a presbytery can suspend a minister indefinitely for a 2023 social media exchange with no evidence admitted and no witnesses called, the credibility of church discipline as a mechanism is placed in serious jeopardy. Congregants are watching. When they see a pastor lose his ministry over banter on X while watching other leaders weather years of serious controversy without consequence, they draw conclusions. And those conclusions undermine the very institution the courts are meant to protect. The PCA is a serious denomination with serious people in it. This case demands a serious answer, particularly on the procedural allegations. If Garris was convicted without evidence and without witnesses, this is not a theological dispute about what counts as unwholesome speech. It is an institutional failure. And institutional failures of this kind require correction at the denominational level, not silence. A man's ministry has been suspended indefinitely. Over 2 tweets. The man those tweets were directed at has posted things publicly that dwarf anything Garris wrote in terms of contempt and personal attack. According to those present at trial, no evidence was admitted for the charge that convicted him. No witnesses testified. And the denomination responsible has not responded publicly. This is a story about how institutional power, when it operates without consistency and without accountability, becomes something other than justice. That problem does not belong to any one denomination. It belongs to all of us. We will continue to follow this case. If you found this video valuable, subscribe and share it, because accountability in the church requires witnesses. And right now, the church needs more of them.